Welcome to this Frequency Matters podcast. I'm Eric Higham along with Pat Hindle, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Charlene Caputo, VP at Leonardo DRS's RADA business unit. Thanks for joining us today, Charlene, and it's very nice to meet you. You and your team are working on some radar-related issues that will be of interest to all our listeners. But before we get into those topics, can you tell us a little bit about what is now the RADA business unit of Leonardo DRS? RADA Electronics Industries merged with Leonardo DRS about 2.5 years ago. Can you tell us about the capabilities you brought to Leonardo?
Certainly. So thanks so much for having me. Grateful to be on this podcast. So RADA merged with Leonardo DRS back in November of 2022. We brought with us a baseline of tactical ground radars that are software defined, capable of essentially partitioning and focusing on threats. We consider ourselves a multi-mission capability, so we can actually address and identify threats that are from multiple mission sets. So counter UAS, APS, CRAM, cruise missile defined threats. So we were able to bring that offering in as part of Leonardo DRS since 2022. Grateful to be there.
And so based on what we're seeing in some of the ongoing conflicts, UAS or drones really have become like an integral part of the battlefield threat. Why have drones become such a significant threat? It seems like they came out of nowhere.
So I think it's a great question. We've really seen a huge uptick in terms of just, I think they're commercially available. So a lot of the end users have easy access to them. And then in terms of dynamic capability, they've really been able to been shaped by multiple adversaries to really create a threat that they understand and know. It's very difficult to kind of identify and detect them. Some of them are very small in nature. We've seen lots of swarm activities, other activities where there's these dark drones where they essentially have, a specific destination, very difficult to detect. They can hover, fly very slow. They can fly very high. So we've found that these adversaries have been able to get a hold of these threats and drones very dynamically and then been able to employ them. I also think based off of some of the scenarios that we've seen, OCONUS, that people have become smarter and smarter over time and been able to get access to these essential drones and then use them for their own specific purposes. So.
Yeah, interesting. And I think as we see time and time again, of course, if something is identified as a threat, there's always an activity to counter that threat. So what are the Pentagon and other global defense organizations doing to combat that drone UAS threat?
So we've seen, and actually, so we're a primary, I would say we're the first part of that chain. So we really do the essential detection portion of it. There was a recent quote from Northcom about, hey, if you can't see a threat, there's no way to do anything further. So we consider ourselves kind of the first part of that defense capability. And I would say the Pentagon's doing a very good job of looking at a myriad of ways in which they can address these threats. So we've seen, high-powered microwave, laser, kinetic kill, 30 millimeter, APKWS, all dynamic capabilities, even soft kill options, EW. They're really trying to have this like what we would categorize or identify as like a layered approach in addressing some of the threats. And then we're essentially providing a cue to either a kinetic, non-kinetic, or even just for optic purposes, just for, intelligence gathering, for strategic reasons. We've also done some of that.
And so your group's heavily involved in the radar systems. How are radar systems evolving to meet the drone and UAS threat? Because, most radar systems were designed for fast-moving large objects, and these are very small, can be slow-moving objects. So it's kind of not been something that's been detectable with regular radar.
So we're a small radar, IESA-based pulse Doppler. So we operate off of movement. And I would say traditional radars maybe of the past have been large focus on a threat that's been well-defined and well understood. We've really taken a proactive approach in addressing dynamic threats. So low-flying drones, very high-flying, loitering munitions we've seen through some of the scenarios that have been happening, OCONUS, We've really also tried to do this, what we call is like a gap filling capability. So where there's been, traditional threats that have come in, we've really figured out that there's, additional limitations in terms of line of sight, topology limitations, areas in which maybe things could go undetected, and the adversary is becoming smarter and smarter at understanding those dynamics, and then also creating or modifying drones that can be very sophisticated in their approach and associated attack. So we've really tried to address that, what we call is almost like a gap filling capability, or a way of dynamically addressing drones and even understanding in the fact that, what we're identifying as very threatening type threats, 12 months from now, there could be something new. And how are we making sure we get ahead of that? So we're really, trying to take advantage of some of the lessons learned from some of the continuous warfare that's going on now, and then learning ways in which the adversary is really kind of trying to get towards a focal point, and how can we address that. So we're either providing, detection for something that cues something else, and even a look of, a holistic 360-degree view of maybe we're providing detection for a specific location. How is that getting then handed off to having a larger, more comprehensive common operating picture?
Maybe you can tell us a little more detail, how is your radar different than a traditional radar so people have an idea of what the differences are?
So I always say that the benefit of supporting a lot of active end users and being deployed in OCONUS austere locations, some of that data is yielding us tremendous benefit. We're able to really evaluate and do some recognizance on what we're learning from those scenarios, and apply it to the soldier today. So we're able to take some of that data, take it offline, understand also multiple ConOps for these systems. We're employing these in ways over the last 2 years that I think we never even maybe would have imagined 2 years prior. So strategic locations where people need advanced detection, people are lobbing mortars in a very close proximity, drones where there's multiple types and sizes of drones that are coming in, drones that are actually, either trying to come off of friendly drones, they're an adversarial drone. How do you discern between the two? How are you addressing those drones? A lot of scenarios where we're able to kind of ascertain and obtain some of that data and analyze that has created a tremendous amount of, lessons learned, and then hopefully we pass those on to the warfighter.
So expanding on that just a little bit, we just got back from the satellite show in DC, and much of the talk at that show was about multi-mission capabilities, both the commercial and the defense side. And so how does that multi-mission concept apply to counter UAS and EW applications, and what you're doing in the products and systems you're developing?
So I think in a great way, we're really taking a more holistic look at what's going on in the battlefield. And I do think there's been an introduction of more commercial technology as part of that view. I think at the end of the day, people really want things that work well, perform as advertised. And if there's more capability and more advancement as part of that, there's just an inherent benefit for everyone. We've seen now applications where people are asking us to use radars in ways that we've not seen previously. At one point it was really solely for detection purposes. And that's, it's just kind of gathering data. We're seeing now that there's, some active/passive requests for capability of, hey, I'm in this dynamic environment. I want to use the radar and maybe I need it for a precision type attack. But in tandem to that, what other options do you have? And so we've really taken another look at some other technologies that are complementary in nature. So some EW capabilities, and then even derivatives where, multi-static approaches of ingesting different sets of data and then using those to our advantage. I think a holistic picture, in terms of satellite, ingesting some of that holistic air picture and then using that to your best advantage. I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of additional capability being utilized or working as like a more comprehensive air picture. I think we're seeing some of that in some of the recent solicitations that have come on the street. I also think the warfighter's expecting, things to be seamless. And there's a level of autonomy that I think there's an expectation there, which I think is reasonable. and they just don't have the resources or personnel to be well trained on all of this equipment. So how can we ingest, take advantage of some of the not only government, but commercial technology, and use that to our best advantage, and alleviate kind of the burden on the operator to have to intrinsically figure that out on their own, especially in a dynamic environment where they may be under attack or under duress, and they have to make these snap judgments. It'd be nice to have technology work in our favor to kind of help with that process.
Yeah, you just mentioned commercial technologies, and I think there's a tendency to think of defense systems as expensive, long lead times, but the industry does seem to be embracing like COTS components and technologies, and really having a more commercial mentality and getting things in the market faster. I even saw 60 Minutes recently, and all those drone sightings over like New England, Washington area. They say it's been a whole year, and they didn't really think there were a lot of systems in place. So how is Leonardo RADA radar supporting the effort? And, what are the challenges to you addressing your radars to get them to market quickly?
So I would say too, we've really taken a approach of having a cost-effective system. We almost consider our systems expendable. We've seen them in the battlefield almost be expendable, where if someone attacks a system, there's a quick kind of replacement. We've tried to lean in very aggressively in terms of mission critical requirements, fielding to the warfighter, making sure we're prepared and ready to do that. That's been part of our business model. We've upheld that since we've started here in the U.S. It's a huge priority to us. We also recognize there's very exquisite, expensive systems that are out there with long lead times that maybe serve a specific purpose and are maybe really great systems. But we're really trying to leverage that dynamic battle space and having an affordable type system. We're leveraging commercial COTS components as part of that. We're working to source as much as possible from a U.S. source supply portion of that. We're really leaning in to make sure that you're getting the rigor and effectiveness of a MIL 810 step spec, but also with the lower price point and having the flexibility of the warfighter to be able to afford these systems and then field them very quickly.
Yeah, so we can't these days have a discussion without mentioning AI and machine learning. So what role will AI and machine learning play in the evolution of your radars and the trends going forward? And what are the challenges of implementing these capabilities in radar systems?
So we have done some AI work, and I kind of laugh when I hear the reference to AI, because I feel like everyone uses it, and then sometimes it's just hard to identify, or what does that really provide as far as an actual capability. We have an AI capability that's a new added feature to our systems. It really discerns between biologic and kinetic threats. So in layman's terms, it's really discerning between a drone and what we would consider a bird or some type of clutter. And it's really evolved through the warfighter and saying, hey, there's some people that are operating here in some coastal regions or areas where there just happens to be a large influx of birds seasonally or just, continuously over time. How do we kind of clear those out of our air picture? And then the adversary becoming smarter and more sophisticated over time. If they know this, is this a place of entry for a drone? And those two things are very difficult traditionally to discern. They have a radar cross-section, an RCS, that's very similar in size. The velocities could be very similar in nature. And now you're relying on an independent operator who's maybe done a 12-hour shift to discern between the two and hopefully help you out. So we've really tried to, we have an implementation of this in our radar baseline now that's allowing for the radar to say, hey, I've got this very high probability based upon the thresholds you've decided to utilize with the radar that this is a drone, and you should take some proactive action. And it's actually throwing away or not showcasing to the operator these birds or what we consider to be false tracks. So what they're seeing is a real clear, comprehensive air picture. It's also allowing the operator to focus on the real threat and to not see the things that are just basically creating additional complexity. We've also seen people who, because of additional tracks or clutter in the air picture, they've almost not utilized systems, right? So do I have to pull the fire alarm every 5 seconds, or is this just clutter and we get a lot of birds here, so I'm not going to pay attention to it? We've really tried to attack that problem and making sure the warfighter is smart and capable and has a clean air picture. So this AI capability is part of that. We also are providing a capability where you can discern between, let's just say there's multiple threats that are coming in. What are the most highest priority type threats? And what are ones that you can prioritize, second, third, fourth, fifth. So you're actually addressing the first most imminent threat. And that also, again, provides the warfighter with the autonomy to make smart, informed decisions and taking some of the onus off on him or her.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, people are really looking to swarm these things and overwhelm. So you have to rank them by priority for sure. So as we look into the future, what capabilities, features, and technologies do you think will be the most important for the radar market and your products? And how do you think the radar market will evolve in the future?
So I think a system that's open architecture, that's easy to ingest into other systems, I think is going to be critical and key. Really, people are going to need to leverage systems that get the job done, that are actually detecting the threats. I think they're going to need systems that are agile in terms of implementation. So again, a threat that's a threat today might not be a threat tomorrow. And how are the systems dynamically adjusting to that threat? I think we're kind of trying to get ahead of that all the time. I would say that's, like kind of a daily approach of what's, new and incoming. What have we learned in some of the media and some other forums to get smarter as part of that? What are we doing to talk to the end user to understand, how dynamic threats are evolving over time? But I think holistically, you're going to need a system that does what it's supposed to do, does it consistently, is reliable, and can adjust to the threat. We've taken an approach of also supporting multi-mission capabilities, so not just drones. So let's just say their predominant threats are drones, but they're also concerned about incoming cruise missiles, or they want to also leverage some ATC type capabilities. So they want to, see the local airfield and see what flights are coming in and out. That could provide additional, capabilities. So what can we do to also leverage the systems outside of just pseudo threat detection and give them a more holistic air picture, but also inform the user and provide additional data that they could leverage in other capacities. So I think that's going to be important moving forward.
Well, great. Thank you, Charlene, for sharing your thoughts today and getting a look into Leonardo DRS's RADA business unit. It's very interesting. Found it informative and insightful. And I think there'll be a lot more developments in this area as things progress. So maybe we can check in with you in a few months. To our listeners, please give us a like, and you can find more podcasts at podcast.microwavejournal.com. Thanks for listening.